Everyone told her not to go through with her plan of letting her stepbrother know she was in love with him before the wedding. Hello, and welcome back. In today's video, I'll share a few interesting stories on people who objected or witnessed an objection at a wedding, the reasons, and the what happened after. The first story. This reminds me of a close friend of mine's wedding. Known this dude for years, we'll call him Ray. Meets a girl we'll call Katie. She already had a daughter, cool right? Was never married to her child's father, they just didn't click, a very amicable separation. Shared custody of the child, no fighting, no demand for child support, very perfect worldy kind of thing. Katie was pretty cool and got along with our friend group pretty well. Soon enough, the old boyfriend she had her daughter with becomes best friends with Ray. Couple of years ago, Ray and Katie decide to get married. Around this time, he confided in me that frequently his best friend, that is the daughter's father, who I'll call Jeff, made references to this girl, and there was some vague evidence of it not being as amicable separation as we thought. Jeff was pretty low-key about his life and talked about girls pretty often, but we learned later that he actually had been holding out for Katie all this time. So, assuming Jeff was his best friend, Ray makes him one of the groomsmen, along with myself at the wedding. Keeps telling Ray about how great Katie is, not to choke, I'm here for you, and whatnot. Ray told him to stop because he was psyching him out. So, that song and dance is happening and the ceremony is about to begin. Finally, me back up with my significant other at our table, Katie and Jeff's daughter is playing on the dance floor. All of a sudden, the music stops, and the DJ says this song is from Jeff to Katie, and says he still loves her, and that it shouldn't be him. Cue It Could Have Been Me by Billy Ray Cyrus blasting all over the hall. Then Jeff goes up and gets on one knee, and asks Katie to dance with him and be his wife. She slaps him, Ray loses it and gets in a fight. Cops got called, wedding ruined. I nope the heck back to the hotel with my significant other and let them all figure it out on their own. They're divorced now. I was not nearly drunk enough for this wedding. Holy crap, this is the most cringy thing I've ever heard. That freaking worm of a man needs to wake up and realize that life is not a rom-com. The bride is not going to appreciate the fact that you snuck your way into the wedding party to upstage the wedding and propose. Not only did the friend ruin his girl's most important day in her life, but what the hell did that android expect she'd say? Oh yeah, now I think about it, let's marry someone else today. And for the second story, this happened at one of my friend's siblings' wedding. Her parents are extremely conservative and hadn't gotten the chance to know the daughter's fiancé very well before they got married. In their minds, all that was relevant about him was the fact he was 10 years older than her and had been previously divorced. They had made subtle and not so subtle comments here and there before the wedding that they weren't too happy about. It should have been a forewarning of what was to come. On the day of the wedding, everything was beautiful. Friend's sister and her fiancé were ecstatic to be getting married and invited friends and family from both sides to their outdoor wedding. All was going well until the preacher asked the audience if anyone has objections to why they should get married. And as serious as can be, Dad of the bride stands up and says, "Her mother and I object." And then after a long hesitation sits back down. Total silence. No one can believe that just happened. Not knowing exactly how to handle it, the preacher just says, "Okay," and finishes the ceremony as planned. I can't even imagine how the bride and groom must have felt. My friend says the tension in the room was unbelievable, but they still got married. They just do a lot of avoiding of the in-laws, as one might imagine. I lost it at the part the preacher said, "Okay." I've always wondered what would happen if someone objected, and apparently it's not much. Besides ruining the mood for the rest of the day, I mean, how awkward too for everyone and especially the preacher. Third story. The one and only wedding I've been to in my 20 years of life. So I was working for a smallish law firm at the time, originally hired for reception, ended up being more of an assistant clerk officer of miscellaneous duties and lawyerific whims. I don't know what the heck that was, but I got a $6 raise, so a 19-year-old me was happy. Anyway, this involved working pretty closely with the junior associates, and I got to be pretty good buds with one of them. She was incredibly smart and insanely hot. Like, I'm 100% into men, but holy moly, she was gorgeous. This may have been the reason why the married named partner of the firm was screwing her in her office every Thursday afternoon. So I learnt of their affair before I found out she too was in a relationship, a pretty serious one, as in she was getting married in 7 months. Eventually I get invited and can't say no because I have to work with her often and it would just be really awkward. Well, turns out most of the firm employees, including named partner she's been sleeping with, was invited, and I was just barely deemed cool enough to make the list. Excellent. Fast forward to the ceremony, the officiant does the whole "does anyone have any just cause for these two, groom's name and bride's name, to not be married?" No one objects. Great as expected, right? Wrong. Bride goes off. She absolutely loses it. She's screaming, cursing at someone in one of the first few rows. She starts to cry. Keep in mind, this woman is in her 30s. I was seated near the back-ish, so it took me a minute or two to see who she was yelling at. Standing up to see, it's, yeah, you guessed it, named partner. This entitled lady thought that they were in love and that when he saw her getting married, he would come to his senses, object, and they'd ride off into the sunset where, I assume, but I'm kinda catty, all of his money would be waiting. Guess who named partners +1 was? His wife, of course. 2 marriages were ruined that day. My life was made. Edit for more details on this incident. The groom just kind of had this 1,000-yard stare going on. He was looking directly at her, but it was more like he was looking through her. The dude had totally checked out after the initial "what the heck, I guess." I didn't witness this, but apparently her mum cried. I did see her dad, who had previously employed the groom and introduced the lucky couple to one another, get up and leave. I would have too, to be honest. I heard a lot of his colleagues were present. He's pretty high up in his area of expertise, and the whole family is a flock of peacocks, so I'm sure there were some extras there that he wanted to impress. But again, I could be wrong. For the most part though, while it was happening, everyone was just kind of watching. I heard a couple of laughs over the banshee screeches, but they were short-lived. The immediate aftermath is the best part, and I'm ashamed I left it out of the initial post as I had to go to work. Anyway, after the bride-to-be finished her triad, she just looked at named partner and said, "So?" Needless to say, no one responded. The best man stepped up at this point and said something to the groom, but the groom did one of those bro hug back of the neck pat things, and the best man went back to his place. Groom looks at bride and tells her very concisely, A, he's never been so ashamed of someone he's loved in his life, he gave her everything he could, but apparently it wasn't enough. He couldn't believe she was so stupid as to out herself in front of her entire work field, his work field, literally everyone they know. B, he let her know that the condo was still in his name and that he was glad he never agreed to a joint savings account. And C, he told her that it was he who destroyed her reptile bag. Found out through the grapevine it was a Hermes Birkin, aka $10,000 to $20,000 handbag. I don't understand either, because it looked like a crocodile, and he hated crocodiles, and she knew he hated crocodiles, and he should have known she'd screw someone else because of that. Then he left, followed by the groomsmen on his side, and the bride stormed out after him. The officiant kind of stuttered through an excuse, and everyone slowly filed out to get wasted in a daze. The named partner and his wife left through a back door. Last I heard, the groom went on his honeymoon with his groomsmen. Half of her family won't talk to her, and the few times I saw her at work after that, she was complaining about how unfair the whole thing was. Edit to 2. She was fired due to a failed drug test weeks later. She was let go due to a failed drugs test, but I bet my current job the woman had never touched an illicit substance in her life. Everyone knew. but just sort of accepted it. Lawyers have a professional code of conduct. You're expected to behave ethically as a lawyer. Failure to do so can get you disbarred. While not all unethical behavior is illegal, illegal behavior is unethical. And many people who engage in unethical behavior, including lawyers, fail to separate between legal but unethical and illegal but unethical. Moreover, it shows poor impulse control and poor judgment. Why not divorce your wife instead of cheating on her? Why cheat on her with something that's stupid? They are clearly not very wise and they clearly have trouble keeping their pants zipped. Who knows if a personal crisis is going to derail them from your case? They clearly are bad at dealing with distractions. The next story, I didn't object. I attended my friend's stepbrother's intimate, less than 20 guests, house wedding with the sole purpose of stopping her from objecting. We were both 30. He's 28. I had never met anyone in her family before. I could tell that people were being as polite as they could to me, but sort of objected to me being there because the ceremony was literally the groom's family. Like the rabbi with his mother, that level of intimate family only. My friend had a very alarming psychological issue characterized by her becoming obsessed with people. In high school, she broke into a crush's house/room, stripped, and waited for him to come home. Since we don't live in the movies, he was terrified of her and his parents drove her home, very alarmed. She had this crush on her stepbrother, who she met when they were both teenagers. When she told us, her group of friends bonded pretty specifically over keeping her from pressing self-destruct. Everyone told her not to go through with the plan of letting him know she was in love with him before the wedding. But then she started to talk about objecting during the wedding. We were stressing out about her ruining the poor couple's day, and then very fortunately, she asked me to be her +1. I spent the entire event listening to her whisper about how upset she was that people kept complimenting the couple. She said a few off things a little too loudly, but I kind of deflected and gave people excuses. I think what actually saved the ceremony was the question, does anyone object? Only came up as a kind of throwaway joke. It wasn't this big dramatic pause. She was upset about that. She actually got up after and went into the kitchen before the ceremony was technically over, but it just seemed kind of rude. I'm not in love with the groom/my stepbrother. Weird. After the wedding, she obsessively regretted not confessing her feelings. She kept trying to find someone to agree that it would be better to tell him how she felt. Honestly, after the wedding, it still seemed like it would taint the event, but her mental health is clearly the more important piece. Her friends became divided on whether she should tell her stepbrother or not, with everyone pushing her to seek treatment and possibly medication. She got some help through an online psychologist. This individual apparently told her that her feelings were valid and she had every right to object. Baseball-sized grain of doubt on that one. And she told the stepbrother after he got back from his honeymoon. I would love to tell you that the fallout was some mental health assistance from her family, but that's not how it shaped up. Her stepbrother and his brothers were extremely kind about it, but she was very upset that she didn't get the response she wanted. She was also obsessed with a kind of over-flirtatious married co-worker around this time. That also ended disastrously. This girl comes from a well-to-do family. She's highly intelligent and quite beautiful. Her life is a series of self-generated disasters that no amount of logic or outside good will have ever been able to help her avoid. Wow, that was overly detailed. It sounds like she has borderline personality disorder. Specifically the I hate you, don't leave me part of it. Also, not that mental health is not serious, it's so real and it's tragic. But this would be a great movie plot/character. On to the next story. My mum and stepdad got married in March last year. We invited a lot of friends and one of them was a lady he worked with. When the priest asked if anyone objected, a lady stood up and told her story about how she loved my stepdad and wanted to be with him, and it was so awkwardly silent, but my mum was crying. It was just a joke. Priest, stepdad and lady were in on it, and I got it all on video. Mum was crying and pushed him for a second, of course. I was honestly about to throw some hands. Edit. No hard feelings, guys. We're all good. Lol. It was messed up at the time, but we had so many good laughs afterwards. Should have known too. The lady wants to be an actor. Edit 2. Made it sound like she was absolutely in distress. She was definitely taking it like a champ. She started laughing afterwards and just pushed him aside like, "You ass. My stepdad is a good man. Just a total jokester." She knew that going into the relationship. Good story to tell in the future. Regardless, that's just mean and not funny at all. I think it's a horrendous thing to do to someone on their wedding day. Just imagine getting that horrible sinking feeling exactly at the happiest time of one of the most joyful days of your life. For a joke? I'm sorry for your mum who married a guy that thinks seriously joking about cheating when at his own dang wedding is appropriate. Next, like most folks, I haven't objected at a wedding and would die of social anxiety if I did, but I met a guy who tried. Meet Dave. Dave's an older guy. Likes to hang out with the young and hip crowd, even manages a few hookups with girls half his age. Dave dates a younger girl for a while, really likes her, but she moves on and several years down the line is about to get married. Dave and said girl meet up for a drink, and somehow Dave gets the impression she still loves him and wants to make a grand gesture to prove his love. Cue to a wedding destination several weeks later. Dave trailers his horse down to the wedding, with the idea that he'll walk the horse down the aisle and shout "I object" and carry the girl away. The girl in question gets wind of Dave's plan and calls the police. As Dave pulls up at the wedding and starts to get the horse out, police stop him and politely ask him to leave. Dave still really wants to prove his love, so being Dave, he starts throwing haymakers and yelling for love for the girl. All of this is happening like a movie scene in sight of the outdoor wedding. Dave is hauled away, and the wedding plan goes on in a much more surreal tone. Kids, don't be Dave. Guy tries to object at a wedding, is instead hauled away by police and ends up with an aggravated assault on a police officer charge. Edit. Since people really want to know what happened to the horse, he was also arrested for criminal negligence. Solid story from the start, but the horse pun made this a 10 out of 10. Also, rather than badass, I would go disillusioned with a sense of the dramatic. Would love to have a few beers with Dave, but I would tell significant other that Dave may try a move. And finally, our last story. When I married my dear husband, one of my closest friends was in the seminary. I asked her to stand up for me and bless our marriage during the ceremony. Although I'm not particularly religious, my husband is, and I thought it would be meaningful for my dear friend to lend her blessing to our marriage. She acted thrilled to do so and did a lovely job at the ceremony. Then, at the reception, she cornered my new husband and scolded him for marrying me, telling him that since he's a Christian and I'm not, we were unequally yoked and in the eyes of the Lord should not have been married. She then informed him that it was his job as the head of the family to bring me to Christ. I happened to walk up to them just as she'd finished admonishing him. He was sheep white, but I didn't learn the full extent of the conversation until later. I ended the friendship, obviously, at which point she tried giving me one of those "I'm sorry if you were offended" apologies. I don't miss her. What happened to "do not judge others or you too shall be judged"? That's it, guys. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. Stay safe and remember to hydrate.